Psylocke was one of those characters when I read the comics. I was probably projecting more characterization onto her than was actually in the book. I've done that many times. I understand.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is your host, Wes, as always. And with me today is my partner in crime, Skipntosh. And we're going to preview the final Dawn of X series premiere, Fallen Angels. Skip, how are you doing today?
Dude, I feel like I've fallen and I can't get up. Bryan Edward Hill, help me out.
Nice. Well, solicit information for Fallen Angels #1 reads, Psylocke finds herself in this new world of mutant kind, unsure of her place in it. But when a face from her past returns only to be killed, she seeks help from others who would feel similar to get vengeance. Cable and X-23 joined Kwannon for a personal mission that could jeopardize all mutant kind. With that in mind, Skip, what are your expectations for Fallen Angels coming into issue #1?
My expectations are just kind of for a very open and more of a basic and streamlined story to be told. And that may sound a little odd, with such kind of a premise that sounds unconventional and not run of the mill. But I think when you have a concept like that, you do want to lay things out a little more normal than usual. Maybe not use some of the more exciting and maybe far out tropes that normally I would be asking for if we had a more straightforward story. But I personally just enjoy the notion of the premise so much that I would like a story that's a little more linear with maybe a kink or two in it to kind of really give the concept alone room to breathe and kind of leave an impression that it seems like will be unlike any other from the Dawn of X books so far.
Well, yeah, since Dawn of X was announced, I personally had Fallen Angels circled on my calendar. Not only does it have a unique premise, it's fronted by one of my personal favorite writers, Bryan Hill. Artist Simon Kudranski is laying pencils and inks down on the series. He's recently been featured in Brian Michael Bendis' Action Comics. Are you excited for the creative team of Bryan Hill and Simon Kudranski?
Surprisingly, maybe to myself more than anyone else. Anybody who has been initiated into the thinking critical realm and sphere anytime recently would know that Brian Michael Bendis is not one of my favorite writers, to be kind and polite about it. But I did, through your reviews and through, just kind of watching other content as I wasn't purchasing those books. I do appreciate the quality of art actually in the pencils from Kudranski. I hope I said that right. So I actually am. I think this may even be an opportunity for Bryan Hill to kind of have maybe some of the better pencils that he's had in some of his more recent stories going across both Marvel and DC. So I am, and with a quality writer like Bryan Hill, I'm sure Kudranski is probably very excited and very happy to be getting away from all those speech bubbles. He probably woke up in the middle of the night just dreaming of speech bubbles over him attacking him. So I'm happy, more than anything, I'm happy for his mental health that he gets a break away from that. And I'm very excited that he's gotten an opportunity to work with Bryan Edward Hill. I see it being a pretty successful and cohesive group.
Well, nice. In a recent interview, speaking of Bryan Hill, with Adventures in Poor Taste, he said, I told Hickman I wanted to do something that was lyrical, philosophical, and about the role the warrior plays in utopia. I wanted to explore identity and the purpose of how peace itself can be an enemy. I also wanted to explore what would happen if mutants left humanity to evolve itself and what the role of technology would be in that. As a writer yourself, what do you think of Bryan Hill's pitch for the series? Is this a good direction for Fallen Angels?
Wow, I mean, I was really excited when I came across that excerpt, and yeah, to me it kind of beat the drum of Skip, so to speak, to hear someone talk about a more fresh idea, a more unorthodox, uncommon, unconventional, if you will, approach to honestly a time and space for mutants that is a little unorthodox and unconventional. So to me, very much, Brian Edward Hill in concept alone has kind of found his own spot and his own place in this, Krakoan era of mutants, this new Krakoan era, the Neo Krakoan era. You can use that if you want, Brian. I'm not a writer or nothing. I don't know what Wes was talking about, but I just think he kind of carved out his own niche in this thing, and especially when you're coming into something like this that we've seen plenty of events and whatnot in comics over the years, but I don't know how many that have been quite like this that we've seen. And when you do come into something like this, you definitely want to find your own niche and something that feels authentic. So for Peace, the concept alone of Peace being an enemy, and then you see the cast that we have and all of them, kind of being warriors through and through, dedicating themselves to fighting various battles through time, through space, through culture, and in the case of Kwannon and her dealings with the hand and whatnot. So I mean, in my personal opinion, kudos to Brian Edward Hill for not taking the easy street, and going down a road less traveled.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. He's definitely he's taken a unique approach, and I like that he's, it could have been just an action series with some people doing some other stuff. He wants to take it in a new direction and take it to like a new breadth to the story, which I think is great. And Brian's, definitely the right guy for it. But, Marvel also recently released 3 pages of preview art for Fallen Angels. We see Kwannon and Psylocke, at peace with herself on Krakoa before she's called by a voice to hunt down a god called Apoth. What are your thoughts on the preview art?
The preview art, I kind of went, and it's odd, coming from the question saying I'm excited about the creative team, and then maybe some of my takes on the preview art. It was a little back and forth for me, because I can separate inks and pencils, I feel like, fairly well at this point. I've got a lot of friends that are artists, so I get to look at kind of the process and whatnot. And in that particular case, the pencils were exactly what I thought they would be from Kudranski. And oddly enough, it's the coloring that I feel like that was kind of taking me in and out of it, and kind of maybe masking it for anyone that watches the Thinking Critical comic aficionados shows that usually occur on Saturday. I believe it was, I can't really remember if it was Doc or Pele. Both of them have such awesome accents, but I believe it was Doc who was talking about some of the pencils in one of the recent Dawn of X books. I believe it was X-Force, and just saying how the coloring had kind of overcome, if you will, some of the pencil work, some of the line art, and even some of just the straightforward inks. And I did get that feeling a little bit when I was looking at the part like, right when Psylocke started to get the communication from the god stating that, or from whatever it was, because it was saying, hey, just like Abraham didn't question, he just did. So I feel like we got a little bit of that in the preview, but honestly, everything before that and all the blacks started taking over, everything before that was fantastic. And even within that, everything that wasn't so overcome by the blacks, which was an awesome creative choice. I actually really liked the choice, but the end result of it kind of lent to a little bit of muddying of what I felt like the essence of those panels were. But honestly, also in my mind, I was like, you know what, this is a very specific thing on a very specific part, and everything before it was fine. So I don't foresee it being a huge issue unless, every other page in the book is dealing with that one particular thing, which I believe we can all ascertain is not the case.
It's one of those interesting things with the age of digital art, and it's the digital coloring that you kind of have to overcome, where the coloring a lot of times does feel like it's oversaturated and really taking over all the wonderful pencils and ink. So I definitely agree with you there that it's one of those subtleties that the colorists that are working the digital age really haven't overcome yet fully.
I agree.
So let's talk a little bit about Kwannon, as Psylocke. In that same interview, Bryan Hill stated, ever since Elizabeth Braddock separated from Kwannon, I've been concerned about what would happen to Kwannon. I didn't want her lost in the shuffle because I always thought she was an undeveloped and interesting character. I also felt that there was a tremendous injustice done to Kwannon by being robbed of her agency of her own body. Now, is this the kind of character exploration that you anticipated from Fallen Angels? Because it's not what I expected.
No, I was delightfully surprised to again, hear Hill kind of have so much care and concern for a character that, aside from the fact of me not having like an extensive, history or knowledge of Kwannon, but just with the limited bit that I know of Kwannon, in the scheme of things, really being, if you want to call an underappreciated character, definitely a character that hasn't been utilized only but so much. and I do like the fact that Bryan Hill will look at the character and then look at the history, how the character, what the character's been through, how they arrived at where they are now, and then to speak to it like, hey, this person, has utterly had their agency robbed, their capacity and ability to do certain things outside of their control, and kind of having fallen, if you will, into the place where they had been, probably most known in recent comic book history. I thought that was really, or even at their origin to a degree, I thought it was really interesting. And again, that's just someone, understanding that a care for not only the story, but a care for the characters is necessary to have a cohesive story where people can get proper character development as well as a proper, story arc. And those are questions that someone who cares and who, frankly gives a damn about not only their job, but what they're going to present to readers. And that's why we appreciate writers and people like Bryan Edward Hill so much within our comic sphere. So I thought that was really cool. And it's so funny that between, there's this very interesting loop of Kwannon, Betsy Braddock, Miss Marvel, originally Carol Danvers, and Rogue, that had this loop of I'm gonna use your body. Oh no, I'm gonna use your body. Oh, I'm gonna take on your power. No, I'm gonna take on your mind. So Kwannon kind of fell in that, probably the least known or least utilized of those people. So again, just kudos to Bryan Edward Hill for noticing things like that and making those things relevant in the most current story.
I can't recommend his interview with Adventures in Poor Taste enough. I just want to talk about one last excerpt. X-Men has long been analogous to the civil rights movement and the plight of marginalized people. Bryan Hill has stated that the series is moving on beyond that. He said, analogies to the civil rights movement can only get you so far. Once that was cutting edge in and of itself, but identity has shifted in society. There are nesting dolls of identity and prejudice, so I appreciate the world evolving past Muty Go Home and exploring what an evolutionary response to prejudice would be. There's also a bit of fascism in what Xavier is doing, a danger in it, and that raises the stakes of the actions of the characters in the story, how they react to the existence of the power of Krakoa. Is now the right time for Hickman and the Dawn of X teams to explore themes other than oppression, which have dominated X-Men comics for years?
I'm going to say abso-freaking-lutely. It was so refreshing, so refreshing to hear Bryan Hill talk about that. Anybody who knows me or may notice patterns with me, from their exposure to me, close to me, and maybe even as close as doing videos on Thinking Critical with you will allow. But I'm a black man. I'm a proud black man. You almost never hear me talk about my color, and it's very interesting in this day of age where the concepts and the topics of people of color and this or that are often brought up and put to the forefront and whatnot. It's almost, I feel like almost in this day and age, we've forgotten how much progress we have made. Obviously, the world is not perfect, and there still are groups and handfuls of racist people and sexist people and this or that, but that number has immensely dropped as people have evolved, as older generations who maybe wanted to be beholden to some of those things that plagued society have passed on, and the newer generations have been raised to be more accepting of things, you know, outside of people's controls that aren't inherently harmful to anyone, like being a white man or being a black man or being a Mexican woman or, you know, whatever. So so for Bryan Edward Hill, who is also a black man, to be more concerned with, you know, with his own agency, his own mind, and recognizing that this isn't the 60s anymore, you know, but still realizing, yeah, there are other things that are plaguing society and there's other issues now. It was just so refreshing to hear that. And I do want to hear about those things. You know, it's not that I don't want to hear about how people are going through this or going through that or whatever. I really, really appreciate the fact that there are new things that we're dealing with now, new questions, you know, even things as far as, you know, robot rights, if you will, or things that Jonathan Hickman and even Jerry Duggan kind of slightly touched on. What is the ethics and the moral relevancy and proper positioning of bringing someone back to life that may not have ever asked to be brought back? You know, even like I said, exploring themes around stuff that kind of has been around for a while, but maybe was a little bit more taboo. Kevorkian style things, right to live, right to die, all of those things. Yes, as someone who I do feel like the essence of progression and being progressive is within me, with the balance of understanding and respecting what came before us and holding on to the things that do work and respecting, you know, our past and truly learning from it so we can have a better future. Those are the things that I want to hear about. That's what I'm interested in. And I believe those things are quite relevant, and I think can really, really serve a purpose for the people that are interested in looking beyond just even themselves and what the national climate and narrative is, to find out where we truly are as humans and what we might want to try to look ahead to try to avoid or come up with solutions with. So kudos and props to Bryan Hill again for just being himself.
Very well put. I really appreciate that. So we're gonna wrap things up here, but you know, this Sunday we're gonna do an Adamantium hour now that all the Dawn of X books have released their first comic. Are you gonna be there joining us this week?
I am going to be in attendance. Yes, I am indeed, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So thanks for the invitation, and thanks for letting everybody else know.
All right, yeah, so definitely join us on Sunday. Doc's going to be there. Skip's going to be there. I'm going to have a couple other special guests, and we're going to get into all the Dawn of X books, and we'll definitely be talking about Fallen Angels #1 because it releases this Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining me today, Skip, and I'll talk to you later, man.
Peace.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews, and don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.